What I'm saying is, if you do whole surveys where you're asking one or two questions and you share the results, make sure that the data rolls up, that it doesn't just go to management, that it goes to human resources, and hold people accountable for the results. The idea of whole surveying people and responding to it and considering the feedback and seeing if you can make a difference with that feedback has to become an organizational behavior. Like, it has to be something, we just do this regularly and this is just part of our job and this is how we stay connected to our people. With my book, I'm the first one who's saying stop talking about engagement and start moving to well-being. And so it has to start with the CEO. It has to start at the C-suite. They have to buy into this.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where we unpack the ideas of disruptors, deep thinkers, and creative catalysts who are reshaping how we lead, how we learn, and how we live. In this episode, my guest is Mark C. Crowley. He's author of the best-selling Lead from the Heart and the recently released book, The Power of Employee Well-Being. For 25 years, Mark led nationwide teams to record-breaking success at one of America's largest financial services companies. His success was based on what was then an unconventional approach, appealing to people's hearts as well as to their heads. Today, in addition to being a popular consultant and coach, Mark is a regular contributor to Fast Company magazine and was named by Inc. magazine as a top leadership and management expert. Mark's work challenges long-standing beliefs about what truly drives performance and makes a compelling case for why well-being is not a soft strategy, but it's a bold business imperative. In a world where burnout is rampant and engagement is stagnant, Mark offers a blueprint for building workplaces where people flourish and performance follows. Mark Crowley, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you so very much, Roger. Lovely introduction. I appreciate that.
We're glad to have you. Let's start with this. Beyond the usual corporate wellness programs, how do you define employee well-being?
Well, I think you set that up really well. The well-being is not wellness. And I think if you look at what organizations, their first go at this, if you will, was to say that we need to elevate well-being. So they gave people yoga classes and meditation apps. And they were like, okay, we're done here. And I don't mean to sound so cynical, but I've kind of like, I look at that and I'm like, we never really look at how we might want to lead people in a very different way. And that's really the essence of this. The interactions that people have with their boss is generally the culture of an organization as far as people are concerned. It's generally the driver of whether or not people feel that they're happy and content and growing and appreciated. And so I'm differentiating the employee well-being aspect from wellness because it's really managerial behavior that we're talking about.
And setting up foosball tables and free snacks in the employee lounge isn't really what you're talking about.
I mean, that's massively superficial, right?
Right.
Instead of sitting down with people and saying, how can we support you? Because people will give you the answers. We're just prescribing, hey, go out there and buy them a foosball table and ping pong, and, that'll entertain them. It's bread and circuses in leadership. That's kind of the mentality.
Right.
And so I'm really arguing, and we'll get into this, but what I'm really arguing is that we need to change how we lead as a means to elevating employee well-being. Because science is now showing that well-being is the greatest driver of productivity there is. So anybody listening to this going, I don't have time for that. Well, that's not my responsibility. Why would I be worried about that? Let them worry about that. I mean, I've heard all this. But what I'm trying to convey to people, and in the book, what I make very clear is that the science is very, very straightforward. There is a linear relationship between how people feel in their own self-assessment to how they perform in their jobs on a week-to-week basis. So simply asking people at the end of the week, how did you feel in your work experience at the end of the week? And depending upon how they grade themselves in that experience, they can go back and look at the key metrics of performance and see them go up when it's green and down when it's red.
Right. Well, talk a little bit, if you would, about the relationship between purpose and well-being.
Well, I think purpose has to do, I'm listening to that question and trying to digest it in a meaningful way. My instinct says that purpose is an alignment to who we are as a human being and what we're meant here to do. And so if people are in the right job and doing the work that they are talented to do and excited to do, that sort of fulfills the idea of purpose. And if you are that synced in with a matchup between who you are and what you're doing, that inherently is going to bring you a component of well-being. There's simply no question. There are a lot of people, Roger, that get up every day going to jobs that they don't like.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's sort of hard to have well-being when right out of the gate, you're unhappy.
Reminds me talking with a guy at one of my client companies years ago. He said, I have only 12 more years until I can retire.
Oh, man.
I can barely wait to get out of here. And I'm thinking, 12 more years. So he's already been there 13. He's going to get in his 25 and will have been miserable the whole time.
Right. What kind of a life is that? And by the way, if you get up every morning thinking, this is awful, you're creating chemicals in your body that are going to wear you down. And
oh, sure.
He's going to retire in 25 years and then die in 26 because he's making himself sick every day.
Yeah, and when the guy told me that, I thought, I wonder what it's like when he goes home at night.
Oh, yeah. A lot of fun to be with, right?
Oh, my goodness. So let's get back to the metrics a little bit. How does employee well-being directly influence performance metrics like productivity and retention? What do you see?
Well, what I see is that when people have a sense that their needs are being met. So we'll go back in history. Maslow said that, that we're all here to maximize our own potential. But he also said that, when you think about the pyramid, down here on the bottom is safety, food, water, shelter. And for a very long time, people went to work to meet those needs only. Well, we're in a situation now where people are meeting their basic needs. Not everybody, but a lot of people are, where they are earning enough to meet their basic needs. And they're going to work saying there's got to be more to it than just me working 10 hours a day and you giving me a paycheck. So people are ascending in Maslow's hierarchy and they're looking for growth, they're looking for development, they're looking for purpose and meaning. And leadership hasn't caught up with that. We're continuing to think that, hey, if you don't do a good job here, Roger, there's somebody out there waiting to, take over your microphone,
Right.
And so that is a misalignment. And so when people have that alignment, when they feel that their needs are being met, but specifically working for someone who wants the best for them, wants to see them grow, coaches them, develop them, make them feel safe and feel appreciated. All these are positive emotions that lead to the experience of positive well-being. And when you have that, you're just naturally inclined to perform better. Right? If you're happy and you're excited and you feel good about the person you're working for and the organization and the work you're going to do, it's intuitive that you're going to do a better job. But if you're being, managed by fear and intimidation, or, they're doing all sorts of untrustworthy things, suddenly laying off people without notice and, all the kinds of things that we see, which I describe as sort of bad behavior in leadership because it undermines employee well-being. So then people are going to give less. It's just natural. Why would I want to give you more? Why would I want to give you discretionary effort when I get so little from you? This is how humans work. We will reciprocate whatever is given to us. That's been proven.
Sure. Well, you suggest that engagement metrics have failed us. What's the core flaw in how companies measure engagement?
So I'll tell you an interesting thing. You write for Forbes and I write for Fast Company. And about 12 years ago, I wrote an article and I was speaking with a head of research at Gallup at the time. And what I was inquiring was whether they had any new research that could validate that people were fundamentally unhappy and unsupported, not having their needs met at work. And I just happened to hit the timing perfectly. And Gallup was about to produce something that called the American Workplace Study. And so in the conversation, he was giving me all the data. And I said, well, I have an article coming out. Can I publish that data? So he literally gave me permission to write and, basically publish this shot heard around the world.
Yeah.
And only 30% of Americans are happy at work.
Oh, boy.
So, and my reaction was like everybody else's reaction, Roger. It was like, oh my God, like that's horrible, and how much better could organizations do if we improved it? And oh man, all man's to the front. We got to fix this. This is how I'm responding to it. This is how everybody seemingly responded to it. But I get these updates from Gallup, and about a year ago, I'm looking at the numbers and it says engagement has fallen to the lowest level in the last 4 years. But I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, these are the same numbers they were 12 years ago. We haven't made any improvement at all. So you're calling it out as they've fallen over the last couple of years. How about calling out the fact that we've done nothing? We've made no improvement with all the talk and all the books and everything.
It seems like we've been talking about engagement forever.
That's the answer. That's all we've been doing is talking about it, right?
Yeah.
It's all been very insincere. It's been perfunctory and performative in organizations. And I attribute it to that Wall Street never took it seriously. So CEOs never took it seriously. So you have somebody in the company going, we really got to get on board with engagement. The CEO's like, whatever you need to do, but I don't really care that much about it. So they'll go out and they'll survey people once a year. Now it's up to 2 and they think they're doing a much better job. But by the time they digest the information, get it back out to managers, it's already too late. The managers getting complaints, they're looking at it and they go, well, that happened 5 months ago. That's irrelevant. So they dismissed it. We never held anybody accountable for it. So if you don't hold anybody accountable for the improvement, then it's just a report that you throw away afterwards. And that's all we've done for the last 15 years.
In fact, it becomes insulting to the people to even survey them.
100%.
Don't ask the question if you're not going to do anything about the answer.
I actually wrote this in my book saying, ironically, it decreases engagement, the very thing you're trying to measure,
Right. So what generational differences have you found in how well-being is prioritized or received?
I think obviously it's a human thing, so we're all looking for it. But it's interesting because we're in this sort of weird period of time right now, and I think we're at this moment where the group that really didn't want to return to work the most after COVID, like really didn't want to, was Gen Z.
Right.
Because I got my laptop, I can go to the beach, I can go to Starbucks. I don't need to be in an office, so don't make me. Well, what's happened is that same audience had a change of heart, a radical change of heart, where they realized, I'm missing out on learning, I'm missing out on connection, which is a human thing that's really important.
Sure.
They aren't getting coaching and development. They're not building new relationships. They don't know what's going on with the organization. But I really think that the core is that people of, Gen Z and even to some extent, Gen Y, the millennials, they just realized that was too much of a sacrifice, that losing connection was harming them. And there's actually science that shows, there's data that proves that over the last 10 years, we've had a 24% decline in like micro connections, like going to the dry cleaner and talking to the butcher at the store.
Right.
Even at Starbucks, we're ordering on our phone. We just walk in and we pick up the one with our name on it. We don't even talk to the person that made the coffee. No, all of these harm us. And so now I was just talking I spoke yesterday to a major technology firm, and they've gone from 2 days in the office to 3 days in the office. And there's a little bit of resistance to that because it feels like a takeaway. But what I explained was that it's still, those 3 days in the office are invaluable and give us permission to work remotely 2 days a week. If you don't have the 3, your whole team is going to erode. The cohesion of your organization is going to erode if people are just working remotely because, as one of my former podcast guests, Herminia Ibarra, said, she's at the London Business School, she said, human beings are lazy and narcissistic. And as a result of that, we're not going to reach out. Like, I'm going to call you or send you an email and I'm going to go, Roger, we have not had a conversation in 6 months, so let's reserve some time and get together. And she's saying it ain't going to happen.
So we can check it off on our to-do list.
We just won't do it. And she said, though, if you want to see Roger, get into the office because you'll run into him a couple times a week and you can have a conversation and get caught up. And I believe that.
Yeah. So you work with a lot of organizations. How do you convince skeptical executives that well-being can produce a significant return on investment? What's your pitch?
The pitch is that you might be hoping that I'm going to give you some noble cause, like, we need to be do-gooders in the world. And I would love to believe that CEOs have that inclination, but they absolutely do not. They're completely deferential to Wall Street and to the performance.
It's about numbers.
It's all about numbers, right? So you go, look, well-being sounds really great. Let's give them the yoga class. Let's give them the meditation app. And we're kind of done here. Okay, so off you go. My argument is, how are your healthcare costs looking these days? Because we know across the board that they're going to go up over 10% next year, just the costs. Well, why? Well, I mean, it's not just because healthcare costs are naturally increasing. It's because there's another component of healthcare costs that is accelerating in ways that is going to cost these companies bottom line. And it's mental health. Gen Z, particularly, and this all goes back to human connection and my original book, Lead from the Heart, which is that if we don't get connection, if we're not interacting with people and we're not in presence with people, we're missing out on something and it ultimately becomes very harmful to us. So if I'm sitting here and I pick this up and I'm just going to text Roger and tell him how I'm doing. I'm not having the connection that I need to have, right? So if you don't focus on well-being, and one of the interesting things, and I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but I'm going to insert it, which is that belonging is the greatest driver of employee well-being there is. So if people aren't feeling that they know the people they work with, if they don't feel accepted by them, if they don't feel supported by them, they're missing something very, very harmful, and that leads to toxic mental health. So I'm saying to CEOs, if you don't fix this, if you don't do something about it, because people are spending 10 hours a day at work, they're not going to make it up anywhere else, you're going to have accelerated mental health care costs that's going to turn into absenteeism. It's going to turn into, it could turn into turnover if it gets severe. Absenteeism is a very big one. Workers' comp is another one that could interfere with this. But simply, the performance of people isn't going to be very good if they're suffering from some kind of mental health issues.
Well, I'm interested in your observation on this. What daily behaviors, observable behaviors, seem to distinguish leaders who are authentically caring about employee well-being? What does that look like?
It's interesting because I just posted this on LinkedIn today that I became friends with Gallup and Jim Harder, who's the head of research there.
Right.
And one day we were having a conversation and he goes, we found that about a third of people in the world have an inclination to care about other people. In other words, I call it a caring gene since then. Like it's imbued in them, right? They come out of the womb with an inclination to be interested in the growth, success, and well-being of other people. So that means 2/3 of people aren't.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that if you put those people into leadership roles, they have a natural inclination to be focused on their own recognition, their own bonuses, their own growth, their own development, their own, status in the organization. And so other people appear to them as a tool to get what they want, as opposed to when you think about most successful coaches, you have one in Kansas City, you look at the inclination of them their orientation is to care very much about their players. They want to know about who are you? What are you trying to accomplish here? Do you want to be the CEO? Do you want to, do you want another promotion? Do you want to learn a new skill? How can I help you? How do you like to be appreciated? So knowing people is one of the cornerstones of this. Simply knowing who they are, what's going on in their life outside of work. You can't manage people if you don't know their story. But the elements of it, the measurable, observable things are that they are routinely appreciative, that they openly express it, and they don't feel like they're going into their wallet every time they have to, Roger, I thanked you last week. I shouldn't have to do this again. Like we have this attitude that that's going to spoil you, that's somehow going to undermine your performance. Like, well, I guess I can skate now that Mark congratulated me on meeting my project deadline. It's like, that's not how it works. It works the opposite. You're going to want to meet the deadline next time to get the same recognition. Coaching, developing, teaching, all of those things, seeing the potential in people. These are all behaviors that leaders can use and display. And by the way, I'm leveraging my first book here, Lead from the Heart, because I'm saying this is what matters to people. How you make them feel is what is really the driver here. And if people come to work going, I work for somebody that knows me, cares about me, supports me, teaches me, promotes me if I'm doing a good job, rewards me, what's not to like? And so people reciprocate.
Sure. Well, I've always held the view, and I suspect you have the same view, that a leader's responsibility is not to create more followers, but to help create more leaders. I mean, that's part of the responsibility. So the question is this: if 2/3 of people are born with DNA that makes them focus more on themselves, you said it better, but makes them focus more on themselves rather than helping others, how can a leader coach someone out of that orientation into an orientation that is more caring and more focused on the well-being of others?
So this is a very, very good question. And so there's a couple of aspects to it. The first one is that the way that we go about surveying people for engagement is, it starts with Gallup's 12 questions. And we literally, 12, 15 years ago, we go, once a year is a pretty good idea. We're going to get a real good assessment of what's going on here, which is ludicrous. Things change so quickly, right?
Sure.
But that's the premise that we all bought into. And then we bought into this idea that, we should probably do it twice a year. Now we're getting at it. And that doesn't even solve the problem by the time the data gets tabulated and out there. And then the other thing is that we go, well, you're going to be going out there and asking those people about engagement. We should be asking about, how do you like the parking lot? And is the food in the cafeteria up to, right? So we blur all of the whole thing. And by the time it comes in, people are like, well, I guess they don't like our pizza, and they lose the plot. And so we need to throw it away, stop talking about engagement. And what we should be doing is instituting pulse surveys, where we're asking people 1 or 2 questions at a time, where the data can be tabulated instantaneously. You ask the question, you give people 3 days to fill it out. On the 4th day, everyone in the company, management or senior management, has the results. And then you can get together and you can go, what do we make of this? And if you want to calibrate, you want to make some changes, you can make some changes. Hey, we heard that you don't like the pizza, so we're going to bring in hot dogs.
And you don't do it just once a year.
You do it all the time.
Exactly.
But you're asking one question, so you're not distracted. I mean, I'll give you an example of this. In the engagement survey, one of the questions is, do you have a close friend at work? Which, by the way, Gallup has proven is like one of the critical components of whether or not people are going to be happy about.
Sure.
There's another question that says, do you have the right equipment to do your job? Do you feel you have everything you need equipment-wise? So now I get my engagement scores back, and it says, comprehensively, your team's not engaged. Do I go and get them a computer, or do I help them get a friend? So it's very confusing. So we do nothing. We don't do any of it.
Right.
It's like too much information.
It must be the pizza.
It must be the pizza, right? So yes, but your point's well taken, because that's the easy answer, right? We don't have to do anything, So what I'm saying is, if you do pulse surveys and you share the results, so let's say I work for you, And we go out to all the managers and we pulse them and we say, do you work for a boss who cares about you? Do you work for a boss who knows you personally, coaches you, develops you, and wants the best for you? That's the question. Well, let's say that I get results back. And even though I'm a high performer, I see that my performance isn't very good, that my team doesn't like working for me, basically. In the engagement world, you, as my manager, never came back to me and said, hey, you're going to need to fix this because this isn't what we tolerate here. Like, we need you to be a much more supportive person with your people. We can't have it that people don't like working for you, because if they do, they're going to end up leaving, and that's nothing we can accept. So you get my results the same day I get them. So that's going to drive a very different behavior if I don't want to get a chastisement from you, right? I don't want to be told I'm not doing a good job. So I'm looking at these and I'm like, uh-oh. So ideally I am, right? So this is, I think, the biggest shift that I'm asking for, which is stop doing big engagement surveys, which haven't led to any improvement in at least 15 years that we know of. Start focusing on pulse surveys where you're asking one or two questions. Make sure that the data rolls up, that it doesn't just go to management, that it goes to human resources, and hold people accountable for the results. These are all the things that we haven't done with engagement. And I'm absolutely certain that the minute you start holding people accountable and the results are transparent, you're going to see a behavioral change. And one of the things Gallup has always said about engagement is everybody deserves to have a good boss. Well, this is the way you get there, not with the other.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
The other thing that you have to do, Roger, is you have to share the results with people. Like, we heard this. So then people are like, okay, so you really are taking this seriously. And sometimes, like, hey, pizza's pizza. We're not going to change the pizza. But at least we heard you didn't like it. So we are going to bring in hot dogs, but this is the pizza. Unfortunately, we can't change the pizza again, metaphorically. But it's by telling people that you listen to them. And that obviously sometimes you're going to have to change the pizza if it's going to be worthwhile. Otherwise, people are like, they tell us they're going to do something with it and they don't. It's a cultural change, but it's a meaningful one because it creates a win-win work environment where people are really happy to go to work and really committed, and leaders are getting exactly what they want out of people from a performance standpoint.
Well, and then as it turns out, people are more interested in being seen and heard than the taste of the pizza.
Absolutely right.
They want to know that you really heard me this time.
Completely right. I'll put up with the crappy pizza. And because, like, I'm reading you completely. There are aspects of work that we're never going to like, right? Like having to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to get on the road by 8, whatever. It's like, I would just assume not have to do that and not have to get dressed up and stuck in traffic and all those kinds of things. But if I'm going into work, and I'm not really using this as an example of hybrid, I'm really speaking to that work is hard. And, some things, aspects, the metaphorical pizza, we just assume got better. But even in the absence of getting that better, if people feel like, hey, I really truly have a voice here and people respect what I have to say that much, that is a very powerful antidote to whatever the aspects of work they don't like.
Right. So kind of a two-part question here. How do we build well-being into the DNA of an organization's culture? That's the first part. Second part is, if I am being interviewed for a job in a new organization, what are some telltale signs that I can look for that the culture is going to accommodate my well-being? What does it look like?
Let's start with the second one, because I think you have to find a way to talk to people who work in the organization somehow.
Exactly. Not just the HR interviewer.
I don't know about you, but I took a job many, many years ago where the president and the owner of the company were like, you're going to love it here. And I should have probed. Let's just say that, right? So I would say that the important thing would be to say, I would love to talk to some of the people in the organization just to see, if I'm a fit. I think that's a win-win for you too, by the way. If I'm working for you, Roger, you're going to want to know that I'm going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
But if they go, oh, you don't need to talk to anybody, then you got a problem.
That's a red flag.
I just was seeing the statistics that show that the percentage of people that quit jobs in their first year is really ridiculously high.
Yeah.
It's like 40%. And it's because I think both parties didn't do their due diligence.
Yeah.
So, right, the employee didn't ask to say, can I spend a little time and talk to people and just get a sense of how they live their day? They didn't do that. And I think that employers are so anxious, they see you on paper and they go, oh God, Roger, look at this resume. We got to get this guy. But if they had just asked you, hey, one of the aspects of the job is that you have to clean the bathroom once a week. Well, if you find that, again, metaphorically, if you find some aspect of the job that you don't necessarily like, and they didn't tell you about it, you come into the job and they go, hey, today's your bathroom cleaning day. And you're like, how come you didn't tell me this in the interview?
Yeah.
Right? Instantaneous trust destroyed.
Yeah.
Right? So the other question is really about, it has to be part of the culture. It has to be, unlike with engagement, where it was all superficial. It was all just appearances, window dressing. The idea of pulse surveying people and responding to it and considering the feedback and seeing if you can make a difference with that feedback has to become an organizational behavior. It has to be something, we just do this regularly and this is just part of our job and this is how we stay connected to our people. And so it has to start with the CEO. It has to start at the C-suite. They have to buy into this. It's interesting because the person who did the principal research, Gallup is doing their own, believe me. As far as I'm concerned, with my book, I'm the first one who's saying stop talking about engagement and start moving to well-being. But Gallup has already written a book on well-being. So I'm thinking they're seeing the same surveys and still same sciences. It's just that they don't want to give up the business that they've been in, right? The point I was going to make is that the person who's done the greatest research on this is an economist. He's a numbers guy. And he just fell into this and said, I wonder if any element of how we treat people really can translate into greater performance. So it's not a spiritualist. It's not a religious person. You know what I mean? It's not Deepak Chopra who's coming out and saying this. It's an economist from Oxford who basically looking at this mathematically and saying, this is the way to go. And I think that's the language that most CEOs speak. So that's the language I'm speaking.
Well, how could behaviors not affect numbers? Of course, behaviors affect numbers.
It's so intuitive, right? I mean,
I don't need an economist to tell me that.
I know, but we do. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
It's isn't that obvious to you? Right? It should be, but it hasn't been. I mean, for over 100 years, we've believed that we need to oppress people and, pay them as little as possible and squeeze as much out of them as possible. And that's what's going to drive greater profits for owners.
And tell them they're just lucky to have a job.
Right? And that there's another guy out there willing to take your job if you don't keep up, all of that. The whole package is so stupid.
Well, speaking of behaviors, I recently had a great conversation on the podcast with Amy Edmondson of Harvard. As you know, she's credited with popularizing the term psychological safety. So my question is, in promoting well-being, what role does psychological safety play?
That's a lovely, wonderful question. So I'll tell you a quick story. In my first book, Lead from the Heart, the premise is that people are not rational. We believe we are. You go up to somebody and they go, oh no, I thought this thing completely through. And, and yet science is now showing that up to 95% of human behavior is driven by feelings and emotions. So if that's the case, we should be concerned about the feelings that people are experiencing at work, because the positive ones are the ones that drive performance and the negative ones are the drag. So After I finished writing the book, I changed the name of psychological safety to psychological and emotional safety, because it's not just up here. And that's what psychology seems to imply, right? Well, after I got done with the book, I reached out to Amy Edmondson and asked her if she would write a testimonial for the book, not thinking that I'd just taken liberty with the greatest management figure in the world. So she wrote a beautiful testimonial, told me she loved reading the book, and never, ever said a word about the change that I made, which implies to me that she understood why I was making it, particularly in the context of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm absolutely huge admirer of her, but what I'm really saying is that it's not how people think, it's how people feel. And so management, to sort of the joke that we've just been sharing between us is that, leave your troubles at the door, we don't tell me how you feel, all that kind of nonsense. Well, whether you want to believe it or not, it's happening under the hood. People are making decisions based on their interactions with people and whether they trust them, whether they feel good, whether they feel that the person has their back. All of these things are influencing people all the time. And so psychological and emotional safety is a core component of belonging. So you look at the world we're living in right now, and you've got red states and blue states. You've got people that are MAGA. You got people who are anti-MAGA. And all we've done as a society is make one side hate the other, one side distrust the other, and vice versa. And we are dividing people and really being very critical of the differences in people, just appearances and religions and you name it. And so then we live in this environment, and then we go into the workplace, and I'm managing people, and I start to look at people and I go, that guy's nothing like me, so I don't like that guy. Well, if you're managing that person and you're making that kind of an assessment for whatever reason, that person can feel that.
Sure.
And if they don't feel they belong, if they don't feel that who they are in every aspect, I don't like guys who wear, maroon sweaters. Like, you have to accept people for their maroon sweaters in all aspects if you're going to lead properly. One of the interesting things that this research in Oxford showed, the adage is that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. What they've proven is that that's true. However, what triumphs over that is that people leave when they don't feel a sense of belonging, when they don't feel connected and respected by the people they're working with, including their manager. So we have this societal pressure to hate anybody who's unlike us for many, many reasons, and it's working really, really well. However, when we get into work, if we can't put that aside and look at that as nonsense anyway, like we're all different, we all have unique skills, we all have varied backgrounds and differences in our life experiences and what made us who we are, that we wouldn't want to dismiss that is just patently stupid, but that's what we do. So when people go into work and they go, that guy doesn't, or that woman, that person doesn't respect me for who I am, then I'm getting out of here. So what we need to do is to foster environments where we are respectful of who people are. Why did you hire the person? Why did you bring them in? Because they have talents, they have abilities. So use the talents and respect that people are going to be different and that you're different and that you don't want to be judged by anybody else either. And this seems like so obvious, sort of the common theme of this conversation, but it needs to be intentional so that people feel not just a psychological, but an emotional safety, ability to be themselves.
All this makes me realize that the book I wrote years ago, Change Friendly Leadership, part of the subtitle addressed people's heads, hearts, and hopes. I didn't realize I was writing about well-being, but I suppose I was. Because that's what we have to deal with, their heads, their hearts, and their hopes. People don't want to just be paid in dollars. They want to be paid with behaviors that are respectful and help them feel like they belong and all the things you've been talking about.
I call that emotional currency.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right. And we think, hey, Roger's unhappy today, give him a $50 bonus, tell him to take his wife out to dinner. And again, we've solved the problem. And it's like, I'm not looking for a $50 steak dinner. I'm looking for you to give me some of your time. I'm looking for you to tell me I'm doing a good job. I'm looking for you to coach me, teach me what you know, all of that. And so you're 100% right. But I want to make something really important clear here, which is when I say lead from the heart, I'm still to this day the only one who doesn't mean it metaphorically. So when you have heart in your book title, I'm saying that is literal, that the heart and the mind are connected.
Yeah.
And we want the heart to be outside of the whole, in a workplace. We don't care about heart, but it's there happening all the time anyway. The heart is sending more information to the brain than the other way around. So if we understand that feelings and emotions, which includes the body and the heart, are influencing this. So in your title, did you ever have anybody going, hey, I get the change friendly stuff, but a heart thing, like, did you ever get anybody to go, I'm kind of not really sure where you're going with this? Like, you had to, right?
Yeah, sure. And then I would explain to them, and they'd, oh, yeah, okay, just like, fine. Yeah, it's that touchy-feely stuff. No,
right.
It's not touchy-feely. If you're interested in the bottom line, this is all affecting the bottom line.
I'm saying it's affecting us in our entire bodies, and that influences our thinking and our choices and our behavior. So if you want to ignore the heart, you're ignoring an essential component of humanity that is actually influencing how they perform every day. So it's a complete myth that just, we just look at data around here and we just look at numbers and systems and, processes. And I'm like, okay, that's you need that. But you also need to know how people are feeling. You need to know that people are coming into work with all kinds of life experiences. And if you're ignoring that, you're ignoring they're who they are. You ignore their humanity. People feel that, and it's almost instantaneously, I got to get the hell out of here.
Exactly. And if they don't leave literally and in body, it's really worse because you've got what I call road warriors. ROAD, retired on active duty. They're still there, but they're not really there.
They're not there. Yeah. There's the expression to lose heart.
Yeah.
Like that didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, this place is awful. Yes, completely.
So how do global trends like AI, remote work, and economic uncertainty intersect with well-being?
The people that are creating AI aren't creating it out of here. The rush to create AI is happening here, and it feels existential.
You're pointing to your head.
I'm pointing to my head, and I'm saying it's not coming from their hearts.
Right.
So you've got all these people that are developing a technology, and their motivation is to not be wiped out. In other words, the major companies, technology companies that are developing AI are saying, I got to do it before Roger does. I got to do it before my competitor does, because if somebody does it better and faster than I do, I could be out of business. I could literally just wipe out my business. So in that mindset, literal mindset, without any concern about how this is all going to play out in terms of people, you're seeing some of the worst behavior happening right now, right? CEO of AT&T saying, I'm going to speak in the vernacular. I don't give a shit about how long you've been here. Royalty doesn't matter to me. What matters is your performance. And if you want to stay working here, you better perform. Okay, there's some truth in that, right? Always, right? If you stop performing, then there's going to be some accountability here. But if I've been with you for 15 years and you just told me that doesn't matter, how am I going to come into work every day?
Yeah, and I bet nobody there said, oh boy, I really feel a lot better about coming into the office tomorrow. This is great.
But such a low hurdle that he tripped over, right?
Yeah.
All he needed to say was, we need to have really great performance right now because we're up against some stiff competition, and I believe in you, and we're going to do everything we can to support you so we can meet our goals. How does that feel on people? That's very different than telling me, hey, sucker, 15 years, who cares, And so we have that. So I'm pointing this out because I'm in an environment right now where there are organizations that couldn't care less about well-being. But there are many more enlightened organizations, Roger, that are just looking at how do we get greater performance. Part of the issue that we're dealing with right now is how fast everything is changing and how volatile some of that change is. And it's blowing people up. There are many people that just cannot keep up with, we were going right yesterday, now we want to go left today, and then tomorrow it's going to be up, and then it's going to be down, and it's head spinning. And so if people don't have a general sense of well-being, they're going to be kaput. And I think organizations are beginning to see that the more they can do to support their people, the more able they're going to be to deal with ambiguity and massive change and disruption and sort of roll with the punches instead of being overwhelmed by it every time. So I think that's the bigger alternative here. And so if you're at Microsoft, they've been laying people off left and right, thousands of people, and they're doing it like in tranches instead of doing it all at once. Instead, we've done it now, we're not doing it anymore. So you've got people that are marinating in fear that they're going to be next.
Right.
And they're seeing their culture change. One of their employees just asked in a public meeting, have we lost all empathy for our employees here? He asked Satya Nadella that question because this was a company that demonstrated that they valued people, and then they just been off 4,000 years, another 2,000 years, a high 100 people. And it's like, wait a minute, is this just going to keep happening? And, there's no stability and safety. Remember the pyramid?
Yeah.
If you don't have safety, you can't perform. So I think the enlightened companies are realizing you can't mess with people because the world is messing with people on its own.
Right. So, Mark, what is your view on how business schools might highlight well-being as a core leadership competency?
I think they're already on board with it. It's interesting because there's a gentleman named G. Richard Schell, and he is a Wharton Law School professor. But about 10 years ago, he's a humanist. And they asked him to be responsible for changing the entire curriculum at the Wharton Business School. Because up till then, and by the way, the reason that they asked him to do it and the reason that they recognized the need for change was because MBA students were going to prison for all kinds of unethical, fraudulent kind of behavior. And they were like, we're not teaching the right things here if we have students that graduate from here and go on to go to prison and become felons, right?
Yeah.
So what he told me was that he said, we never really focused on how to motivate human beings and manage human beings. It was all about manipulating an income statement and a balance sheet, right? And arcane financial tools. And, oh, by the way, if you're not going to hit your quarterly numbers, laying off people might be a good alternative. This is what business schools have taught for years. And so you look at the Amy Edmondsons and you look at the Adam Grants of the world, they didn't exist 15 years ago. Like, these are really enlightened people that these schools are now attracting and making stars, and they're bringing this wisdom. By the way, interestingly, my son told me this today. I didn't know it. My book, The Power of Employee Wellbeing, is #1 new release in human resources. That tells me that the group that is most responsible for culture is paying attention to this. That is the best sign that I have that this isn't going to be engagement 2.0 that nobody takes seriously. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'm pretty certain that the science is so clear and evident, and it's so simple to do. How are you doing today, Roger? Is pretty much, as opposed to, I got 25 questions I'm going to ask you. It's probably going to take you 45 minutes to complete them. And by the way, we're not going to get back to you and tell you anything will happen with it. That's the difference.
Well, I would even suggest that leading from the heart, as you've written so much about, is frankly more fun. And I'm from the school of thought that you should enjoy your work. And when you really care about other people, and you genuinely care, and you show them that you care, not just lip service, but your behavior demonstrates that, it's just a whole lot more fun to lead in that kind of environment. And it's certainly more fun to work in that kind of environment.
100%. And I would add rewarding and fulfilling.
Of course.
I'm getting a little long in the tooth, and I don't remember the goals that I hit or how much revenue I drove or whatever. I remember at the time that was important and we met the goals. But what is most sustaining to me, to your point, Roger, are the people. I haven't worked in a corporate environment in 15 years, and I'm having coffee on Sunday with someone who's come into San Diego and said, you're not getting out of this. We have got to get together. It's somebody I promoted like 18 years ago. And when I hear that people want to spend time with me that used to work for me, that tells me that this was all worthwhile.
Yeah, sure.
it's fun. It was enjoyable, but it's also like, what do you have to show for your life if you just exploited people to meet your goals and to get your needs met? I agree with you completely.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us on Leadership. You've given us more than a framework. You've offered a mirror. At a time when organizations are desperate for performance, you remind us that the most effective leadership isn't about leaning harder into performance pressure. It's about leaning deeper into human connection. Thank you for reminding us that leading from the heart is not a philosophy. It's a strategic imperative, and it just might be, in fact should be, the future of work. To our listeners, I say, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team, your network, or anyone else who's ready to lead with more heart and more impact. And be sure to leave us a review. Even a single sentence fuels the algorithms that promote the great content that Leadership Podcast offers. And for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.